The European Union is moving to ban Chinese companies from critical infrastructure projects. Officials are rethinking their policy on what they see as high-risk Chinese suppliers. They also want to remove their dependence on big US tech companies. But critics say there aren't that many European alternatives, and the consumer will end up paying more if they go ahead with this. So, can it really be done? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, for years, Europe has been trying to balance its reliance on affordable Chinese tech with growing warnings from its allies. But that balancing act may be coming to an end. A proposed Cybersecurity Act would legally phase out Chinese suppliers from telecom networks, solar energy projects, and security scanners. It's a move that aligns Europe with Washington. But at what cost?
Cheap, fast and reliable. Chinese tech has been used across Europe for years, but now that same technology has become a security concern. As part of a proposal for its Cybersecurity Act, Brussels wants member states to stop using high-risk suppliers in their critical infrastructure. Although it doesn't directly name them, those affected are believed to be Chinese companies Huawei and ZTE.
We will assess the countries of concerns, and we will also assess which are really the key components of our critical infrastructure. And after that, we will also propose mitigating measures that how we can also mitigate the risks we have there.
The move follows a rise in cyber and ransomware attacks and fears over foreign interference and espionage, as Europe relies on non-EU technology suppliers. China has retaliated, saying it will take measures to protect its tech firms.
We urge the EU to stop pursuing the wrong path of protectionism. China will do what is necessary to defend Chinese companies' lawful rights and interests.
Hungary, Austria and the Czech Republic are among EU members that rely heavily on Huawei's equipment, and walking away from it would be incredibly expensive. Concerns over Chinese technology are not new. In 2020, the EU introduced a voluntary plan to reduce dependency on Huawei and ZTE in 5G networks. But some member states hesitated, worried about higher costs and possible pushback from Beijing. Since then, scrutiny has intensified. Germany has recently launched a major review of its trade policy towards China and banned the use of Chinese components in future 6G networks. The US has gone even further, banning approvals of new telecom equipment from Huawei and ZTE in 2022. Security may be the goal, but by cutting out some of the world's most cost-effective hardware, the EU risks a digital showdown that could leave it falling behind its major competitors for years to come.
Well, let's bring in our guests on this one. In Gloucester, in England, we have Graeme Stewart. Graeme is head of public sector at Checkpoint. Joining us from Brussels, we have Linlin Liang. She is Director of Communication and Research. That's at the China Chamber of Commerce in the EU. And here in the studio with me, I'm delighted to have the technology journalist Marianne Russon. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Graeme, want to start with you. When we look at some of the language used by the European Union officials here, when they say high-risk third country suppliers, that's pretty much code for China, isn't it?
I think it's code for anyone that the technology and the security people feel uncomfortable with. So in this particular instance, and the release has been focused on Huawei and ZTE, who are Chinese manufacturers. But frankly, anybody that the security services in individual nation states, the EU as a bloc, and even within the UK, any country that or manufacturer that poses a potential security risk is being flagged here. And in this particular case, it's two Chinese manufacturers that's been called out.
So, Graeme, let's put our cards on the table here. How big do you think the risk from China is to European Union countries? Is it exaggerated or is it real?
Well, so if I take the UK example, which is a leading example here, the UK has done very similar to what the EU has done in terms of asking its telecom networks to wean itself off of the Huawei and ZTE 5G equipment. Actually, it's not the equipment itself that's the problem, is the chipsets that are on it. So forgive the kind of sort of technical reference here, but because of a US set of restrictions that were placed on the selling of chips to these manufacturers, the quote here was that the UK security services could no longer manage the risk around those chipsets, and so therefore they couldn't actually guarantee the safety of the equipment. So the risk is real, because if you can't guarantee the chipsets, it's the guts of the system, it's the bit that does the intelligent processing. So that's what's being called out here. And the danger, of course, is, and the suspicion, of course, is that this could be used for nefarious purposes. I'm loath to call out the manufacturers directly on this, because I don't know enough about the bits and bobs and how this stuff plumbs together at a kind of chip level. But the security services have called this out as a risk, both here and particularly in the Czech Republic. And so you kind of have to take that risk very seriously.
Thank you. Well, let's go to Linlin and get the Chinese view on this. Linlin, what do Chinese people think when they hear stories like this, when they see this kind of coverage that European Union countries don't trust Chinese companies?
Well, I think this fear is, from the perspective of business, is exaggerated, and our members, and I mean the wider the Chinese telecom providers and companies in this sector actually have a proven record of providing trustworthy products to European consumers. So I would say, so current discussion around this is quite concerning, and that is why when the Commission's proposal to revise the Cybersecurity Act and so on hasn't been very well received, not only the Chinese community, but on the other hand, from our partners, the European partners, this is also very concerning as well.
And Linlin, Europe is such a big market for China and Chinese companies. Do you fear that that's something you're going to lose?
The European market is, of course, of great significance to Chinese companies, and it is very inviting, appealing, and we have, let's say, the EU prioritize the digital transition, and so does Chinese market. So I'm saying that there's an interplay role, not only the European markets, but I think European policymakers should also think about the other markets of the world. On the other hand, not only the European markets, that Chinese companies and European companies in the telecom sector, in the ICT sector, that we also cooperate quite a lot in the third party beyond China, beyond Europe, for instance, the other continents and so on. So this is one can lead to the other. I mean, the European market is huge. Of course, that we share this concern and worry that this mandatory exclusion which the Commission proposed in this act could set up a very high barrier if implemented as it proposed like this. So we do urge that the outcomes, I mean, it's still in the legislation procedure, so we have no idea what the outcome of the legislation will be in the end. But we do hope at this current form of the legislation could be quite negative.
Thank you. Marianne, the Americans kicked Huawei out of its telecom networks years and years ago. Is Europe playing catch up here?
So, I mean, the US had sort of kicked them out a while ago, but the more important thing was that the White House basically put pressure on the UK government to kick Huawei out of the UK mobile networks. And in all honesty, through my industry sources, and there were university academics, they were asked by the British government to research into if you could have Huawei equipment as part of a mobile network, could you hack across the network, across multiple vendors' equipment, and somehow hack across the network and send information back to China? They have never found that you could.
Wow.
So basically, it was done based on political pressure from Trump, from the first administration, first time round. And the UK mobile operators were kicking and screaming, frankly, because it's expensive equipment and it costs 20 to 40% more to get it from the nearest rival, which is Nokia or Ericsson. So from what I'm seeing of the telecoms industry now, which is quite a closed sort of market, they don't tend to talk a lot outwardly. They were already very unhappy, but they are extremely unhappy now because the telecoms market is in decline. So now if this goes ahead, the thing is, we don't know, is it just the EU saying stuff? Because the EU does tend to say things. The AI regulations, the AI Act, that's been pushed by over a year. You know, we don't know if that eventual legislation is going to come through or if they're saying things to sort of hint to the wider world, to Trump, maybe don't put too many tariffs here, this isn't going to go well for you. But from the telecom side, there is, if you look at the GSMA, they're the global sort of mobile industry body. They're the only ones who speak for operators. So they rarely say anything. Just from long experience of interviewing them, they don't say much. But they've issued a 2-paragraph statement. And what they've basically said is that they're concerned. They say while they share the Commission's objective of reinforcing Europe's cybersecurity, they're saying that basically the legislative measures are like far too overreaching. And they've even basically, this is a lot of detail for GSMA, they've basically saying it's not targeted, it's not risk-based, and, you know, not all equipment elements are equally sensitive, making blanket approaches unnecessary and disproportionate. Beyond the lack of proportionality of the proposed measures, the unrealistic timelines risk significant disruption to services for users as well as high additional expense. They've basically said what I've just told you as an actual statement, which is a lot.
Thanks, Marianne. Graeme, to you, just when we talk about critical infrastructure, what are we talking about here? What does it mean to the man and woman on the street?
Critical infrastructure tends to cover and in this case, we've talked about the mobile phone networks, but it's critical infrastructure covers everything. So it's banking, so it's the mobile phone network, it's the payment network, it's things like pharmaceuticals, it's things like food distribution. So critical national infrastructure covers, and generally there's sort of 13 or so different areas that it covers, air traffic control, things like that. And that's all of which would be considered if it went down. Imagine how it would be if the payments network went down, for example, the chaos that would cause. Anything that would have a significant and measurable impact on the operation of society, that's what's described as critical national infrastructure.
And Graeme, the European Union officials, do you think they worry about China stealing data or being able to flick a switch and impact how that critical infrastructure actually works?
Yes. So that's the fear, but that's the fear of security professionals across the world, regardless of what the network is. There is, hacking takes place across the world. We've seen examples all across Europe, all across North America, all across the UK, of impacts on retailers, on banking, on healthcare, of attacks. And so the security services, what they're focused on in individual countries and here at the European Union level, is any interruption of service for critical national infrastructure. And the driver around this legislation is that the Chinese equipment is perceived to be a threat, and therefore they want it removed from the network. The political considerations aside, and there are some other economic considerations aside.
Linlin, to you, how do you think China will react then?
Well, I think it's a question about the possible retaliation in the future, and I would say that if, let's say, the current mandatory exclusions would take place in these current forms, I really doubt that there will be very calm reaction. Actually, we do already hear some urges or some calls from the business sector to consider the possible measures to tackle with this thing. So the only thing that from the business community, the last thing we want is escalation. But of course, initially, we do hope that the Commission will not have the very first step, which, to spiral everything up.
Linlin, can I just ask, Huawei has won a lot of big lucrative contracts in Europe. Do European countries get a fair crack of the whip when they're bidding for tenders and jobs in China, for example?
Well, I think European companies ranked at least the third in China, and if you take into consideration of how big the Chinese market is, so the share is quite appealing for European companies. So they were granted a license to build China's 5G network. They were granted all kinds of conditions, I think. So in China, it's about the market competition. But I think European companies have, let's say, not major issues in contributing to the Chinese 5G construction or building it up.
Thank you. Marianne, earlier on, you mentioned two mobile phone companies which don't get very much coverage in the news, and a lot of critics would say haven't really pushed on from where they were. Nokia and Ericsson.
So Nokia and Ericsson are two of the largest companies in the world that provide the equipment that goes into mobile networks. They're mobile network technology providers. And so basically, we have 5G. You know 5G as you use it on your phone, you have internet, but that's not really 5G in what they were really talking about. They wanted 5G to be this all singing and dancing network whereby it would have such internet data speed power that children, young people could be walking around with handheld video consoles, probably bumping into lampposts, and they would all be high quality and they would be able to handle the bit rate. And they also wanted it to power AI-driven self-driving cars. And the idea was you would have that mobile signal on every single lamppost and trees around the city. None of that has come to pass. We have probably more like 4G plus. Your speed is a little bit faster. So because the mobile operators spent so much money putting in their 4G and 5G networks, they're not getting the return on the investment. You could argue that these are companies that print money. So some of my older technology journalist friends have no sympathy for telcos, and they think they treat their customers badly. But they have these old incumbent networks that were originally copper, right, for the main telephones. Then you add the mobile networks. They didn't get the investment. All your VoIP services, your WhatsApp, all of your apps have come on. They've done Wi-Fi calling. We've taken away the business from the telcos. So now no one's giving money to Nokia and Ericsson. So Ericsson actually told me they had been petitioning governments to spend money to expand their 5G rollouts. And guess what? They're not giving the money. So it's stifling innovation.
But come here, just on the point of Nokia and Ericsson, my point is they would surely be winners out of this, won't they? If Huawei goes away.
So Nokia is saying, so it's differing, right? So on one hand, they're saying, what the media, some people in the media are saying is that it is a huge opportunity for Nokia and Ericsson. But actually, the guy who's currently one of the top bosses in Nokia, who's been a huge proponent in talking about this, he has been actually campaigning in the last 2 years saying, why are you even using Chinese tech? Why aren't you using European tech? But at the same time, they're not, yes, they could win from it, but also Beijing could implement tariffs against them. So at the moment, Nokia's just signed to license their technology to Chinese car makers, back to the self-driving car thing. They're licensing their patents there. They're making 200 million euros a year from that. However, apparently, the total income that Nokia would lose if China put tariffs on them is more like 1.1 billion. But apparently, that's a lot less than the money they could get if European operators were forced to only use their tech.
Thanks, Marianne. Graeme, to you, I noticed that Spain last year signed a 12 million euro contract with Huawei to store intelligence gathered from wiretaps for the intelligence agencies and police investigations. So clearly, some European countries are quite happy to do business with Chinese companies like Huawei.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. One of the big kind of issues in the tech sector is this idea of sovereign capability. There is, for example, within the European Union, you can't store data outside of the European Union. So the companies that provide the cloud-based services, people like Microsoft, people like Amazon, people like Google, have to have facilities within the European Union. So I don't know the detail of this contract in Spain, but I would be flabbergasted if they were allowed and able to store that data outside the European Union. That sovereign capability is kind of enshrined in law, enshrined in doctrine across Europe and in its widest sense. That sovereign capability is really important. I mean, the interesting point about the Nokia and Ericsson is, aside from those two, there aren't really any big competitors from Europe able to deliver the carrier grade, the telcos, the carrier grade equipment available for those carriers to actually buy from. So the sovereign capability thing is really interesting, and I would be, like I said, flabbergasted if that data was being sent from Spain off to a storage facility outside the EU, let alone in China.
Thanks, Graeme. Linlin, to you, I want to talk about the consumer impact here, because a lot of people in Europe will be watching and thinking, how does this impact me? But if Chinese companies are offering the best deals and the best price to various different governments for big critical infrastructure projects, if China is removed from this equation and European countries suddenly have to find other alternatives and they're more expensive, the knock-on effect will be hitting the consumer in the pocket, surely.
Oh, I fully agree. I mean, in the end, the cost will be passed on to the end. So I think that unfortunately, that probably the consumers and of course the telecom companies, in the end, the consumers probably will bear the impact, and that is why it's again, this is what the concerns come from. But on the other hand, I'm not talking about only the prices, whatever. So for the competitive edges for the Chinese companies, it's a package of the prices, affordability, and innovation and the services. So, and then we're also talking about the choices in the market. So, excluding to the Chinese suppliers from the market would not be very fair for the market competition. It's not the healthy business environment. So, indeed, for the the impact passed on to the consumer, unfortunately, is one of the results of the exclusion.
Thank you. Marianne, is there paranoia in Europe about China, do you think? I mean, everyone wants business, everyone wants trade with China, but at the same time, there is this suspicion and fear, like xenophobia, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more paranoia. It's European protectionism. So I think Graeme was making a really good point about sovereign cloud. That's something that I've been writing a lot more about in the last year. And basically what they're sort of saying is, so what all of the experts say on any type of technology, if you talk to the analysts, they're sort of saying Europe has always been very keen on protectionism. But the issue is protectionism, it's bad for business. It rises costs. But also you don't want to make all your neighbors and all your allies upset with you, because then that stifles innovation as well. Nothing gets done. But with sovereign cloud, so it comes back every 10 years. 10 years ago, they were going on about sovereign cloud. They shut up about it. In the last year, they started talking about it more because there are concerns that US cloud companies are they're the ones providing cloud services, and all of that data is being sent across from Europe to the US. What happens if the Trump administration were to order AWS or Google to stop providing cloud services to Europe? What would happen to their data, and would the European companies lose their data? They're very worried about that now. And so that's becoming an issue. But if you talk to technologists about sovereign cloud, they say, well, we can't have cloud data centers only in Europe. Yes, you can build one in Europe, but it's running on American AWS software technology, and the chipsets are made in Taiwan and Korea. So how is any of it actually sovereign to your land? It will never truly be sovereign. We are 20 years behind. Europe is 20 years behind the US in cloud technology, and obviously cloud is very much connected to telecoms as well. So all of this, we're never going to be able to beat them. So the tech giants and all their AI models and all of the data centers will continue to be in the US. Even if you have a European data center, it's still going to run. Globalization is still unavoidable.
Thanks, Marianne. Graeme, your country, the United Kingdom, is not in the European Union and won't be affected by this. Just talk me through that thinking behind the UK decision about Huawei in recent years and 5G. It was quite fraught at times.
Yeah, so NCSC, who are the cybersecurity arm of GCHQ, who are our signals intelligence, well, the kind of secret intelligence services, NCSC issued a letter to 35 telecommunication providers in 2020 saying you need this kit off your networks by 2027. Now, there were some fraught moments because there's some costs involved. There's obviously cost of change. There's service interruption. There's some cybersecurity risk around moving kit and doing things like that. But it actually looks like they're pretty much on track. They also, and I know this to be true because I've seen this with my own eyes. They've also banned certain organisations from deploying Huawei kit specifically. So we're pretty much already there, the answer is it's been replaced by Nokia, it's been replaced by Ericsson, it's been replaced by some of the other big vendors.
Linlin, final point to you. Talk to me about this other company, ZTE. We're all aware of Huawei. They're far better known, I think, in Europe. But ZTE, just how big are they and how will they view this?
What it is, China's second largest telecom companies, following the Huawei. So they are competitors, and of course, I think they cooperate to some extent, probably as well. So, they are probably the largest or the second providers in China. So they're in the same industry.
Linlin.
A smaller version of Huawei, if you could view it in this way.
Graeme, thank you so much, Linlin and Marianne as well, for all your insights. Remember, you could see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.